Hi, I wanted to review with you guys some of the key skills that you're going to need as we make our algebra questions more complex. We've a lot. What I'm seeing a lot is I'm seeing a lot of people in the class are able to figure out what the variable is, so they're able to solve the equations, but you're not following the steps that I've showed you. You're just doing it by kind of figuring it out because you know your times tables, you know your number facts, and that's great. It's great that you can figure it out. But I really want you to learn how to do it by following the steps I'm showing you. So that's what we're going to work through today. We're going to go through some keywords, some vocab, and then we're going to do some examples on this board. And I want you to follow along with me and take notes on a piece of paper so that you can remember. So the first thing that I want to go over is the word operations. So, what are operations? Operations in math are things we do to numbers. We can manipulate them, we can change them, we can, add to them or subtract, we can multiply or divide, we can take square roots, we can square numbers. Operations are those things. So the four main operations that you need to know, and you need to know what this word operations is referring to, are adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. Okay, I want you to write that down. I need you to understand what these things are. And it's also important that you know that these things here are opposite. So the opposite of adding is subtracting, and the opposite of multiplying is dividing. And it's important that you know that because when you do algebra and when you attempt to isolate a variable, you must do the opposite operation of what is next to the variable in order to isolate the variable. Okay, let's clear that away. Okay, the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is I want to talk to you about isolating the variable. So, isolate variable. What does it mean to isolate the variable? I want you to write down what you think it means to isolate the variable. Okay, so what it means to isolate a variable is it means to separate it and have it on one side of the equation, on one side of the equals sign, and have all the numbers on the other side of the equal sign. So in this, situation here, there's a 4 and there's an x on one side of the equation, and there is a another number on the other side here. So isolating the variable, we have to figure out what is the variable. So the variable is x, right? So right now, it's not isolated. Right now, it's beside a 4. And both the 4 and the x are on one side of the equation, and the 16 on the other. So in order to isolate the variable, that means that we're going to get the x all alone on one side of the equation, and we're going to have the 16 and the 4 on the other side of the equation. So that's what it's talking about when we say isolate the variable. And if you thought that you needed to divide both sides by 4 to solve this equation, then you were right. Okay, let's pause this. Okay, so let's do some practice together to practice using our knowledge of operations, of the 4 different operations we're going to be using: multiplying, dividing, adding, and subtracting. Using our knowledge of those to use the opposite operation of what we see beside the variable so that we can isolate the variable, okay, and solve the equation. So it's important that you follow these steps on your paper at home when you're doing this, because that is how you're going to learn this. That is the way that you're going to learn how to do this math. You're not going to learn it by just watching me do it and just saying, oh, okay, I get it now. You have to do it. You have to do it on a piece of paper with your pencil. I want to see you doing it. I mean, I'm not going to see you doing it, but I want you to do it yourself. So the first one we're going to look at is this one here. So I want you to write this down. X plus 4 equals 8. We'll say 8. Okay, so in this number problem here, we've got x and 4 equals 8. We're saying that if you add, x is some mysterious quantity. We don't know how much it is, but if you add, we know that if you add 4 to it, the whole amount, the equation, equals 8. So your task is to figure out what x is. So what we have to do is we have to find what is the operation that is attaching the number to the variable in the equation. So in this case, the constant term 4 is being added to x. Okay, so it's adding. So in order for us to isolate the variable, we have to do the opposite operation. The opposite operation of adding 4 is subtracting 4. So I want you to write this down. We're going to take away 4 from both sides. When we do that, there's no longer 4 on this side of the equation, okay? There's no longer a 4 here because we've just taken it away. X, now that's crossed out. So then we can say that X is equal to 4. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Is 4x equals 16. So let's write that down. 4x equals 16. So the coefficient 4 is right next to the variable x. And the question is saying that 4 times unknown variable x equals 16. In order to isolate the variable x, because these numbers are multiplied here, then we have to divide. We divide both sides by 4. When we divide the left side here by 4, we get, it's going to cross that out. If you were to turn that into a fraction and make an equivalent fraction from 4 over 4, you would get 1 over 1. And 1 over 1, or 4 over 4, over 100 over 100, those are all the same as just the number 1. So there's going to be 1, 1x. And then we can just solve it on the other side. 16 over 4 is equal to 4. So x is equal to 4. Okay, let's take a look at the next problem here. The next problem here is x over 4 equals 9. Okay, so a couple of things I want you to notice about this problem. First of all, the first thing I want you to notice is that this line here, when there's a line like this is showing division. Okay? You're looking at a division problem, and the opposite of division is multiplication. So you know that you're going to have to do multiplication. The second thing I want you to notice about this is going to be a fraction when we're done with it. And this fraction is going to be an equivalent fraction to 9. It's going to be an improper fraction, but it's going to be equivalent to 9. So some number over 4 is equal to 9. So let's try that out. So because it's division, we know that if there's a line, it's division. We're going to multiply. So we're going to multiply both sides by 4. That crosses that out. It gets rid of it. It becomes x equals 36. And so you could substitute it here. And we can say 36 over 4 is equal to 9. So that's how we can kind of think about it as a fraction as well. Okay, and let's look at one more. Let's look at 12 minus x equals 9. Okay, so I'm just going to pause that actually. You know what? I'm actually, yeah, we'll do this one. Okay, so there's a couple ways we could solve this problem, and you know what? It's actually going to put us into the integers. So right now, this is showing positive 12 minus x is equal to 9. So right now, this number 12 is on one side of the equation, and the x is with it, and the 9 is on the other side. So there's a couple ways we could solve this. As long as we do this the same thing to both sides, we'll be fine. So the first way we could solve it is we could just subtract 12 from both sides. So negative x is equal to negative 3. Now that doesn't really work so well. So what I would suggest we do is we just move things around a little bit differently. 12 minus x is equal to 9. What we're going to do instead is we're going to add x to both sides. Now we can say that 12 is equal to 9 plus x. And now we can take away 9 from both sides, and then we get 3 equals x. We'll cross that out. Okay? So that is how we solve algebra. Now it's really important that when you're going through, that you go through and you do the steps. Don't just write in the answer for what you find. Do the steps. Because when we get into a more complicated algebra, so as soon as we get into a more difficult concept, it's going to be really difficult if you don't know the proper steps to take. Here's a good example of a situation where it would be very difficult just to figure out what x is just in your head. Now, I'm sure some of you can do it, but again, you need to learn the steps. You need to learn how to do the steps so that you can properly solve the problem. And just for fun, let's solve this problem. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna add 5 to both sides first. Oops. So I've got 3x plus 3 plus 5 equals 5x. And I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. Crosses that out. Crosses that out. And 3 plus 5 is equal to x. I'm going to simplify it by combining my like terms. Divide both sides by 2. I'm going to bring this up here. That is equal to 4. So 4 is equal to x. So that's a more complicated one. And so it's really important that you guys know how to do the steps. Okay? So I'll let you guys, I'm going to let you guys fill in the notes. You would have filled the notes in already for today's review and have done the notes. And now you can come back to class and we're going to go through some more stuff together. Okay?